the state of the classroom and the fact that all the kids are on the ground today, we're right in the middle of our project week where they're building sustainable and equitable communities. So they had to take this break just to come in. So sorry about that.
Not a problem. Not a problem. And I know you've all got a very busy week. The same here in Olympia as well. So let me start very quickly by giving you an update as to where things are. And things have moved and changed a little bit since the last time that we talked. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, as you remember, we were originally working off of Senate Bill 6048 that was sponsored by Senator Cooterer from Bellevue. We're still active with that bill, and I spoke with Senator Cooterer this morning, but it looks like there's a good chance that there will be a new bill. It's not really a new bill. It was introduced last session in 2017. This is Senate Bill 5025, sponsored by Senator Malosha, who's a legislator from Federal Way. It has a hearing this afternoon at 1:30 in a totally different committee, and I'm planning on going there and testifying on its behalf of you all at the committee. So this is not uncommon in Olympia, to where you think you've got a bill here and you're working on it, but then all of a sudden there's another bill over here that becomes what we call the vehicle or the mechanism for the issue to be moving through the legislative process. And I think from now on, we'll probably be looking at Senate Bill 5025 rather than Senate Bill 6048. But I won't know for a couple more days whether or not that's going to be the case. And to confuse the whole issue even more, there's a House bill from last year that's sponsored by Representative Harris, who is very interested in this subject. The bill was up last year, had some action on it, and right now the bill is not in a policy committee like the Senate Bill 5025 or Senate Bill 6048. It's actually moved out of a policy committee last year and has been referred to and retained in what they call the Rules Committee. And that bill, which is House Bill 1054, may become the vehicle for this issue. So don't worry about the numbers. Let me worry about it. But all depending on what's going on with the legislature and where things are moving at any given time, these numbers could change just as long as the issue is still moving forward that you're interested in. So are there any questions about that and kind of what's going on with all that? And then I'll let you know a conversation I had with Senator Cooterer and the fact that I'll be testifying this afternoon on your behalf on Senate Bill 5025. But are there any questions at this point?
Eric?
Sorry. When the bill changes from 6048 to 5025, is 6048, is it tabled, or do they go back to it at a later date?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think it's likely to be tabled because there may be more momentum or more opportunity to get 5025 out of the committee that it's in. It's in a different committee than the committee that 6048 is in. And all depending on the chair of the committee and whether or not they have an interest or whether or not it's just easier to get it out of the other committee because of where the votes are, it could be part of that. I don't really know. Your question's a good one, and it's likely that 6048 will be tabled in favor of 5025 being the vehicle for the issue.
Jacob?
Why would they switch from 6048 to 5025? Are there any main differences or variations in there that we should be aware of?
It's a very good question also, and the answer is yes. There is a slight difference in 5025 from 6048. And the only difference in reading the bill, and you may want to take a look at it yourselves online to look at the differences. I'd point out that when you get to section 9 of 5025, that's going to be different than where you see anything in 6048. There's actually one new section that's in 5025 that's not in 6048. And it has to do, I think it's minor. I don't think it's a big deal, but it has to do with how they authorize the Liquor and Cannabis Board enforcement officers to go about and check in whether or not someone's 18 or 21 years of age. It's a minor piece, and I don't think it's that big a deal. The other thing that's interesting is 6048 and the House Bill 1054 are the same. They don't have that same provision in it. So we'll just see how it goes. And it's possible in committee, before they move anything out, there could be amendments. I've heard there could be some amendments on 5025 and even possibly 1054 on the floor. But let's go ahead and I'll go to any other questions you have, and then I want to get in a little more detail on that.
So if they're so similar, like, why would they change the bill? Is it just to like get a new committee, which will help it pass, or like?
It could be that. Remember, each of the committees have different makeup, and all depending on who's on the committee, they may have a different interest or a different take on it. So I'm not real concerned about what comes out of committee. I'm more concerned about what is kind of on the floor to be voted on, and then we can take a look as to whether or not we like or don't like some of the amendments. Now, you all have proposed a couple of amendments. Remember, we're talking about more enforcement as it related to vaping, and then maybe a proviso that allows someone in the active military to be able to purchase cigarettes or tobacco at 18 rather than 21, make a carve out or an exception there. So I've asked about those amendments for Senator Cooter's bill 6048, and she was not interested in being supportive of those two provisions. But it's still early in the process yet. If we can get something moving to the floor and into the other house, from the Senate to the House of Representatives, or the House to the Senate.
Did anyone want to talk about our opinion on the military amendment after we watched the public hearing? Jack?
Yes. So I think that we should remove the proposed military amendment because I think it's unfair for the military people to be to not be protected as much as the civilians, when really they're protecting the civilians. So I think that it's kind of an unfair amendment to make for the military.
How do the rest of you feel about that?
Yeah, we agree.
So we'll back off on the suggestion for that amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seems good. Okay. Max?
So my question is, so during the public hearing, there was some talk about how like tobacco advertising is being directed at like 18 to 21-year-olds. So is there any talk about an amendment limiting that advertisement towards that group?
The answer is no, because I think the federal government has already done that when it comes to smoking or non-smoking and what can be advertised or not advertised, I think. But it's difficult to deal with advertising when a lot of the advertising might be on programs that are televised nationally, and how they would restrict that into a state. And that's an area I'm not too familiar with. I'll look at it and ask if there's a possibility of dealing with that. But I think because there's national advertising that gets into a state because of a national TV program like the Super Bowl or something like that, that might make it difficult. But I think there's federal legislation that already does a lot of prevention when it comes to the kind of advertising aimed at youth. I'll check.
Anika?
During the public hearing, Senator Rivers mentioned amending the bill to include ads. What types of ads would be included?
That's a good question. I'd have to talk to her specifically. I really don't know. But everyone is really concerned about what seems to have been the behavior of the tobacco industry in trying to aim at youth, because if this is an addictive product, then if you can get a person in their younger years addicted to it, then that will continue throughout a good part of their life. And so if you get someone hooked early, then that's where you'd like to direct because of the impact on positive revenue for the tobacco industry. And that's in part why this bill exists, is to try to eliminate that.
Caitlin?
How could the government communicate with tribal stores for them to enforce the law?
That's a super question, and what I'm hearing is that there is a discussion going on between the sponsors of these bills and the tribes, because there is a concern from the tribes. It's a part of their revenue source, but tribes also understand the dilemma that they're in terms of revenue, like we've talked about with state revenue, and revenue to the tribes, but yet it's a health issue and there's a cost associated with that. I'll know more this afternoon when I go to this is in a different committee. This is in the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee. So it starts at 1:30 and later on today. And Corey, this is for you. You'll be able to plug in and see what the testimony was on Senate Bill 5025. And so we'll find out what the thinking is.
So, Al, if we're talking about if it's going to the Labor and Commerce Committee.
Yes, it's already in that committee and is not over in the committee that I testified on before in the Health and Long-Term Care Committee. I'm not sure the reason for that, but that was something that came about at the beginning of the session where the bills were assigned to. And because this is a leftover bill from last year, the committee names have changed a little bit, and so they kind of put it in the same committee that it was in last year, but it was under a different name. But it's not the same committee that Senator Cooter's 6048 went to.
So is that going to change a lot of the public testimony? Because in the last bill, the public testimony was really based on a lot on health, and since it was in the Health and Long-Term Care Committee, if this is in the Labor and Commerce Committee, do you think there's going to be more people who are against the bill testifying?
It's possible, but again, if you take a look at the sponsorship of the two Senate bills, there's overlap there to some degree, and it might be that Melosha, I'd have to go back and look, but I think Melosha may be on that committee, but not on the healthcare committee, so that it's possible, I'd have to look, that it's just more convenient for him because he's on that committee. I don't think the testimony will change very much. Mm-hmm. And I think the opponents to this legislation are likely not to want to testify in the open public. I think that their style will be to try to kill this, but behind the scenes and not do it in the open, which is a style of lobbying that sometimes happens.
Sure, Dustin?
So you sort of just talked about how the opposition would sort of try and kill this bill behind the scenes. What are some ways that they might try and do that?
Well, there's a variety of ways of doing it. The opponents of the bill, the tobacco industry, may go to Senate leadership and say, you know, this is not a good bill that you need to pass in a short session, the 60-day session. It needs more time. It maybe needs more study. And so why don't we just take this off the agenda? You've got lots of other bills you need to work on and pass, and that way it won't take up a bunch of time. I mean, that's one way. There could be another way, in that if the proponents want to get all of the Republicans to be opposed to it and get a couple Democrats, it won't have the votes on the floor. I don't think that'll happen because you've got a lot of Republicans that are sponsors of the 5025 and a few on the other one as well. So there's ways of just trying to convince leadership or try to get a number of members to say, I don't want this bill this session, and so let's not do it. It's possible. Remember that the bill has gone further in the process over in the House, and it's only one step away from being on the floor for a potential vote. And I should explain that the legislature has adopted a series of what they call cutoff resolutions. And the first cutoff, and these would be bills that are considered policy bills, like the ones that we're talking about, 5025 and 6048 and 1054. They have to be out of the committee of origin. In other words, the Senate bills have to be out of the Senate committee by tomorrow, unless there's a fiscal attachment to them, and then they have until next week, it's on the 8th, whatever day that is, so a week from today. So that keeps the bill alive, and then it has to be off the floor of origin, so Senate bills have to pass from the Senate to the House by February the 14th. So we have the second tomorrow for policy bills. If it's considered having a fiscal impact, which this might, it would have to go to, in the Senate, the Ways and Means Committee. They have until the 8th and then the 14th to get out of the House of Origin. But with the Senate bill, the House bill already being in the Rules Committee, it's passed out of the Policy Committee, so it's got some time to get to the floor. And that's what I'm going to be working on next, to make sure at least one of these bills is alive past the cutoff, so that we can keep working on it and then keep working it past that cutoff and then the next cutoff and until it passes the legislature. So that's one of the things I'm going to be working on for you as my client to make sure that we can keep this going if we can.
Where?
So a really easy way for companies to market to children is use of the internet, and the bill didn't quite specify what it's going to do to prevent that or prevent buying from the internet. What do you think could be added to make that happen?
Well, I know the Liquor and Cannabis Board has an awful lot of regulation when it comes to internet sale of tobacco products or even vaping products. So I would assume, and I think there's enough flexibility in these bills, that they could, if they haven't already, and they probably already have, to make sure that they have enough tools to be able to enforce and regulate internet sales. The internet advertising is a different story, and that's something I need to look into for you.
So, Al, if we're talking about who you're going to go today to testify on our behalf, would it behoove us to go over some of the arguments that we made for the last one and see if we have any changes or?
That's a great idea, because I want to make sure that we're on point and on message. And I've got my iPad here, and I'll pull up our testimony from last time. What I was going to do is use the same testimony, not talk about the amendments, because we've kind of had a change there, at least for the military one, and see if we're still on point. Would you like to help me in at least looking at the testimony from last time and any suggestions you have on potential changes?
Yeah, so as he's going over it, why don't you guys think if there's any changes or anything you'd like to add or delete to his testimony?
If you look at it, I started out with good morning. We members of the 8th grade at Open Window School in Bellevue are here to speak on behalf of Senate bill. I would change the Senate bill from 6048 to 5025. That would be the first change. Then you talk about the 4 main points that you have, which would be smoking and vaping harms the health. Number 2, this bill will lead to a better community for all. I can certainly still talk to that. Number 3, smoking and vaping affects us, the youth of the state, directly. And then the 4th one, which is probably the biggest change, is that there's a possibility for amendments. And your amendments, number 1 would be advocate for an exemption for active military. I think we've all decided, you all have decided, that that's off the table. And then number 2, we would also like to advocate for a clear explanation and consequences for online sale of tobacco products, as we know how easy it is to obtain vaping products online. And that's something I can still bring up if you'd like. The rest of the testimony is about the health impact and benefits. And if you looked at my testimony last time, the chairman made it very clear we don't have a lot of time. So if you're repeating testimony that someone else has done, we would greatly appreciate you being brief on your testimony. And so a smart lobbyist listens to the signals that the chair of the committee is giving you. And so I skipped a lot of the health arguments that you made because they'd already been made by the Attorney General's office, by the Department of Health, by the prime sponsors of the bill. So I'm guessing that'll be the same this time around. But tell me if you've got any other changes or suggestions you'd like to make.
So if y'all could think about it, when we heard the testimony before, a lot of the students who were testifying were in high school, right? So they're 4 years older than y'all. Is there anything that you can add to any of these points that makes it specific that this is also affecting you in middle school? You who are 13 and 14, we talked about some of these things in class. Is there anything you want to add that will make his statement more impactful from y'all as middle schoolers, right? Not in high school, right? You're not generally interacting with 18-year-olds who are giving you guys vaping pens. Okay? So how can we add on to these that's going to be more impactful to you? Samantha?
Well, we're going into high school next year, and I think some of us might be worried about how to deal with having this around and like having to deal with it and make sure we stay away from it.
Okay. So if we could add something about the effect on incoming freshmen and how that might, how to deal with those issues and if those aren't there. Does anyone have any other impacts? Maybe some of you who are talking about how you know people who are affected by this particularly.
Could you give me a little specific in regards to people you know and what the impact is?
Like,
I have a guy that I talked.
Yeah, go ahead, talk about it.
Well, I put it in when we were initially talking.
Yeah, but we didn't put it in the
Okay.
statement.
Well, I have a friend who he like vaped a lot and stuff, and then I made him throw away his vape pen, but then he got into more serious drugs like pot and stuff. So vaping, even though it's supposed to be like a better version of smoking, it can lead to more dangerous drugs, and he's 14. So.
Okay. We'll see how much time I have. I don't know how much the chairman will give me, but we'll try to add, some of these thoughts to it to the best extent that I can. Anything?
I never met either of my grandparents because they both died and were major smokers before I was born.
So adding on to that, harming the health and even that better community, for all. Jack?
Well, I guess both my dad's parents smoked when he was a kid, so he's at higher risk for lung cancer from inhaling secondhand smoke.
I will tell you a story which I've told a couple members of the legislature, but I didn't use in my testimony, and I don't think I will. Both of my mother and my father both died of lung cancer. So for me, smoking is an issue as it relates to me personally. And my father died when he was really young. He was 56, and never got to meet my children. And for me, it's really kind of sad that this happened to him. And I will tell you that he started smoking when he was about 14 or 15. He was at 17, and they gave him free cigarettes. Every week he'd get free cigarettes because that was something that soldiers got from the Red Cross. He was in World War II, and it eventually killed him. The war didn't kill him, but the cigarettes did. I guess that's the best way to put it. And so I hear exactly what you're saying by losing your grandparents that maybe you never knew, or the impact it has. And then with me growing up in a household where both parents smoked, you know, I'm subject to that secondhand smoke, and so I get my lungs checked every year when I get a physical, just to make sure everything's okay, because I don't know. You don't know. So I hear what you're saying.
I have a friend who's a freshman, and she told me that like more than half the people in her grade smoke pot. So it like is always reeking in class. So she gets a lot of secondhand smoke also because they just smoke it in the halls.
Did they go to school at Vashon High School?
No.
School. That's where my daughters went to school, and there was a lot of pot smoke, and they said it's cool. Some of it with the faculty, but
yeah. One of my friends smokes pot also, and then multiple of them vape, and then also some of my friends, like they have a friend who's a freshman, her boyfriend's a senior, and he gives her like cigarettes and stuff to give to her friends.
okay, thank you.
And so I think that when we're hearing these stories, I think what we would love to see is kind of the distinction between a high schooler, an 18-year-old who's really concerned, but then also these younger students who are about to start their high school career, prepared to go off to college, but then are also dealing with these issues more directly. And I don't think adults often see it that way.
I will try to place this in the testimony to try to get them to think about the linkage. And if you saw my testimony on 6048, I got up and really tried to represent you, and you're the students, you're the ones that are being impacted by this bill, and this was your testimony. And I think it really made the members of the committee think about it, not from a legal standpoint or anything else. They started to hear from people that are impacted, you people, and what your position is on this legislation, and I think it was very helpful. I should say we've only got a couple minutes left. That Senator Cooter got a hold of me after the hearing, a couple days after, and she would really like to come on TVW and to spend time with you and to discuss this issue. It was not possible to do it today, and so we're going to try to find a time that works for you and that works for her to be able to get her in. This is a difficult week with all the hearings that are going on and the committees that she's on. But she was very appreciative of the testimony that was given and the fact that all of you have decided to make this an issue that you wanted to be involved with. And that's a really good thing. So it was very, very positive. And we'll see if we can find some time that will work with Senator Cooter. Even though it may not be her bill, she's very much involved with this issue, and so we'll see if we can accommodate her and her schedule with your schedule as well.
That'd be great. And Al, is there something that you'd like us to focus on for our next meeting and being prepared to talk about, or should we wait until after this next testimony?
Well, if there's anything that I would suggest, I think we've got the testimony down pretty well. I think we've got the argument well placed to talk with the members. Now, remember what a good lobbyist does is not only do they talk to the members of the committee or the sponsors at the committee hearing, but they also talk to them during the week or before a vote comes up, or as a bill is trying to get it out of the rules committee onto the floor for action. And so I'll be doing some of that. And I want to go into a little bit more detail about the mechanics of how all of this stuff works, because I think we're honing down pretty well with what the substantive issue is and the kind of testimony we want to give. But I want to start highlighting the mechanics a little bit more, and maybe Senator Cooter, if we can get her on, or maybe one of the other sponsors can talk about that as well. So it's more than just the testimony. It's a lot depends on the actions after the testimony has occurred.
Okay, great. And yeah, we'd love to hear if any amendments are getting suggested or how that changes our bill.
Well, things are going to change because something's going to happen. They've only got until tomorrow for substantive stuff, and then off the floor by the 14th. So I'll have a good update for you certainly beforehand.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed doing this with y'all.
Yeah, we'll watch you today. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.